Well, good morning, at least morning for most of us, I think, and welcome everyone. I'm Karissa Kruse. I run the Sonoma County Winegrowers. I'm super excited about today's conversation and actually really excited about how much interest there is. I know we had a lot of folks register to join us, and it looks like already joining us. So a little bit of just about me and our organization. I've been in this role for about 12 years now. I always kind of joked that I thought it was going to be a 2 or 3 year stopover in my career, or swing by this organization and see what's going on. And I just not only am I a complete champion and fan of Sonoma County, but just absolutely love our farmers and really, really appreciate agriculture and what our farmers are doing, not just in Sonoma County, but what agriculture means for all of our sort of futures around the world. And so our organization, Sonoma County Winegrowers, we represent all the grape growers in Sonoma County. There's about 1,800 of them. 95% of our farms are still family owned and operated, which really speaks to the DNA probably of a lot of what we're able to do in our community, and especially our focus and how collaborative we are as sort of a group of farmers and as an organization. Our primary mission is marketing. So we focus on sort of bringing Sonoma County out to the world and our wines and our story. But I think the really exciting and where there's a lot of energy is frankly just helping our farmers continue to be able to farm, not only for themselves, but the next generation. So that's a little bit about us, but excited to kind of dive into all of our topics today. So you want me to just roll with it, Charlie?
Yeah, why don't you just keep rolling? We've got a few
Yeah,
slides
let's
lined
Yeah, I
up.
have a couple of
Yeah.
slides. Yeah, and then feel free to jump in with questions. And I think we're gonna have folks that are joining us be able to ask questions as well. So in order to talk about Farm of the Future, you kind of have to go back a few years to where kind of our commitment to sustainability and a collective commitment to sustainability began. So in 2014, as a wine region, we committed to being 100% certified sustainable in all of our vineyards. I think a lot of the folks, as I looked at who kind of registered for this, probably have a deep understanding of what that means. But for anyone that doesn't, it was about 140 best management practices the farmers were agreeing to do, triple bottom line. So looking at everything in their business, and as well as the environmental practices, as well as, engagement in the community, workforce development, et cetera. The growers would do a self-assessment, and then as part of the certification process, they would have a third-party audit. So that was really an important part of this. Now, you can't really open a newspaper or look at a presentation or a conference that isn't focused not just on farming sustainability, but just sustainability around the world when it comes to business, and kind of the ethos and values of, I think, a whole generation now that's really focused on it. But back in 2014, it was a pretty bold move for us to make a region-wide commitment, already 10 years ago. And so I think I literally had somebody tell me it was career suicide about a week after we made that announcement, because we would just never be able to get it done. And we really we could probably spend hours on talking about how you have adoption of something in a program like this, but that's probably another story for another day. But really, our board of directors, we have a 22-person board of directors, really stepped up and said, this matters to us and we're going to lead the way. And so once you have leaders in a community in ag here in Sonoma County leading the way, it was a number of, education seminars and other things, but we were able to, in 2019, have 99% of our vineyard acres certified sustainable through one of 4 programs that we work with around the state. And since then, which kind of gets us to our conversation today, sustainability has really been our region's calling card. And I say that both for our marketing partnerships. We have a new partnership with the Houston Rockets basketball team. And one of the things I talked about is their focus as, an arena where they play sports, their focus on sustainability and how important it was to partner with a wine region and a beverage partner that had the same, set of values and focus. So it's even with partners that aren't directly connected to ag and farming, I think really care about the partners that they work with and what their values are and what that looks like. And so as part of that, I think we've really tried to inspire sustainability and a movement around sustainability, around ag and wine. And it's an exciting time to be having these discussions. So shall I go to the next slide? So I say that because that's like the buildup and all the excitement and the good news is this commitment. But I always put this in when we really sat back and started talking to our farmers again. We can't escape these headlines, even with all the effort we're putting into our focus on sustainability, we can't, that the headlines still are out there. And I call this now the farming with unpredictability, but I sometimes refer to it as the wheel of pain, that you can kind of spin and see what you're going to get. But we're in constant flux, and we know the unpredictability is happening even faster and faster. And so whether it's a natural event like a drought, wildfires, frost, heat events, flooding, is something happening in the marketplace financially with regulations, with consumer demand for a product, or it's just looking at what's going on culturally and in our community or with our workforce. And so all of those things continue to say we're not doing enough. We need to look to do even more and be better prepared, or how do we be best prepared for sort of the future when we know all of these things can still occur, and oftentimes a lot of them occurring together and intersecting and kind of coming at us at the same time. And so we actually did a survey with our growers a couple last summer, and it's interesting thinking about this wheel of unpredictability, but we heard from our growers that the top challenges, and their top 10 challenges, they were really looking at, labor was the top 3, the cost of it, attracting it, retaining it, as well as looking at some of these natural sort of climate impacts. And then we get into just how do we ensure, we're learning innovation and technology, and it can almost be overwhelming. So again, sustainability really laid a foundational way for us to work together as a community, tell our story, align on practices and our value system. But with all of these happening, we said we wanted to do more. So have you jumped to the next slide? So that really, I guess, inspired our vision for going on the offense. So as you think about the last slide and all of those dynamics happening out there, most of the time we're responding to them. You're responding to a frost event, you're responding to a flood event, you're responding to a marketplace change. And we said, what if we stop responding and actually go really proactive and say, we want to learn now. So when those things happen, we are prepared and we know the best way to act and the best way to respond. And so this is kind of our calling card, again, farming for the future. And we looked at what are those things we need. And we're like, we need our farmers to be flexible. We need to be focused on adaptation and conservation, mitigation, but also really at the end, the important piece around innovation, getting us to net zero. And we're doing all of this because you can't really think about a farming business without thinking about doing this for the next generation. And whether that's succession in their own business or literally just having a food and a system of agriculture available for the next generation, and soils, healthy soils in a community that's protected. So what is the farm of the future? Because you're like, okay, great, you're going to go on the offense. So what does that actually mean? And how are you going to do it? So if you go back, yeah, that's perfect. So for us, it was really about creating an invitation to join us, partner with us, collaborate with us, really creating for us what we're calling a living lab. We said, let's have Sonoma County be a living lab for innovation, acceleration, and technology. I mean, if you think about Sonoma County, we're fairly unique in that we have more soil types than all of France. We have the most coastline of any wine region in California. We have 19 different AVAs, American viticultural areas, that basically designate unique combinations of climate and topography and soils. And so when you think about all of that, it really makes our community of growers a great place to learn a lot, because we can create so many different places to do the pilots to get the information out. So that's where we kind of said, let's create a living lab and have Sonoma County be this living lab. So for us, the farm of the future is about being forward thinking. It's about being optimistic, because I think when you see some of the headlines, it's easy to say, how are we ever going to solve these problems or get ahead or even stay on track? It's based in scenario planning. So for us, it's like thinking through, well, what are we going to need and how are those different paths to get there? We're looking at being more data driven. And again, really thinking about how do we use pilots to scale and to share information. And for us, it's around, our farmers, like I said, are all farming a little differently in that they have to respond to their specific climate, their specific soils, and their business size. But how do we help them understand that if they had $1 to spend somewhere on soil, on different amendments, on solar, on putting in charging stations, where's the best place for that farmer to get a return on that investment, both for their business in terms of efficiency, but also a return on investment in terms of the environment? So that is really what motivates us, and it is our farm of the future sort of vision. So now we could get into the exciting part, which is all of our collaborations to date. So I'm going to go to the next. There you go. So I just put up some logos, and I was hoping just to chat, because I think for us, this has just been a really exciting 3 to 4 years kind of in this Farm of the Future journey. So Farm of the Future, our first real collaboration was with Ford Pro. And this is kind of out there for anyone that's wondering, where do you start or how do you start? Well, we started with a cold call into Ford Motor Company. And I think, it's always about being prepared and having a little bit of, serendipity or luck along the way. And Ford Motor Company and our collaboration with them was certainly a combination of that. So through a cold call into them, frankly, to talk about sponsorship and ask them if they wanted to sponsor an event. They're like, well, we don't really do that, but talk to us about your sustainability efforts. And one of the questions they asked was, how do electric vehicles, electric trucks fit into your future of farming or your fit into agriculture in Sonoma County? And I was like, well, it's going to be the future, the farm of the future. It has to be part of our farm of the future. And that in that moment, it was like, yes, it actually does have to be part of our farm of the future. And what else needs to be part of our farm, the farm of the future? So in that conversation, we started to really brainstorm, well, how would we find out how electric vehicles charging fit into a rural county, a county focused on agriculture, into wine grape growing? And through that, this was around the time, it was about 6 months before the F-150 Lightning, I should say 8 months before the F-150 Lightning was going to launch kind of globally. So it was, announced, but it hadn't come out yet. And so we said, well, what if we actually, take 3 of our farmers who are going to, be honest with you and set up a pilot program where they can really give you real world feedback. And so as part of this, the F-150 Lightning was launched. Actually, the global launch of it was done out of Dutton Ranch here in Sonoma County. And 3 pilot farmers, Vino Farms, Bevel, and Dutton, were given the use of an F-150 Lightning, an e-transit van, charging stations, and then telematics, which is a software that you can put not just on your electric vehicle, but on all of your diesel gas vehicles. And it tracks sort of gas usage, idling times, when you need an oil change, maintenance, all of those things. And so through that 18-month collaboration, we learned a lot. And I think we learned a lot about how electric vehicles fit. And, not a surprise, you see it in the media every day, just how much need there is for charging stations in rural, figuring that conundrum out for charging, especially in rural communities. So I think there is a big role for electric vehicles in the future, but we have a lot of work ahead of us to make sure the infrastructure is there, specifically on our farms. And then we learned a lot about idling. So we were like, we want to save gas, but what I think we didn't understand is literally how much idling time happens when we're driving through vineyards, and our farmers are driving through vineyards. And so whether it's the owners or the vineyard management company or managers, or in general, the workforce, we're able to track. And just in idling time, one of the pilot farmers said, if they were to minimize idling time across their fleet, they would save $24,000 a year in gas. And that's in like real cost. So learning those types of things and the trade-off between an electric vehicle where you're charging, and in this case, it was being charged on solar. So you could charge it sort of during the night on solar. Per mile, it was saving about 24 cents. So going electric versus gas. So those are really important learnings as we think about. Now it gets tricky for us because the current battery capacity of an F-150 Lightning or an e-transit van certainly didn't allow for as much towing capacity. So you still need to rely on sort of those super duty trucks, heavy duty trucks, to do some of that. So we were really finding the best use of the current availability was kind of vineyard to vineyard. If you're just moving people to do sort of work in the vineyards, that was the best use of it. But important learning for all of us. So we're still working on kind of writing up that case study, and case studies for everyone on that. And then recently, we were really excited to announce a new collaboration with John Deere. And I was going to just mention that, these partnerships can take so many different forms and shapes and time horizon. So for Ford Pro, we had 18 months. We really wanted to almost do a takeover of electrification of these ranches, learn a lot, and kind of be done. With John Deere, we started something, and I kind of joked, well, what's our time horizon? And was like, well, why do we have to end? We should just keep going. So I love that. And so for John Deere, we're really starting, and our growers we have 6 pilot farmers, and our growers are going to be, the first step is they're going to have access to a vehicle or equipment called Smart Apply. And so what it does, it actually uses AI technology. It's a sprayer. It uses AI technology and it turns the nozzles on and off as it's able to sense canopy as you're going through a vine row. So they haven't been able to get the data yet in vineyards. That's what we're going to help them do. But in other orchards, there's a savings and a reduction so far of material use. I mean, it can be up to 50%. So think about that. Win for the environment, right, Charlie? And a win for expenses and costs. I mean, so to be able to capture what that can look like for our grape growers, then we can have a really great analysis like, wow, if you invest in Smart Apply or something like that, maybe it's a 2 or 3 year, and in some cases it could be a 1 year return on investment. So as a grower, we want to be able to tell that to not just our farmers in Sonoma County, but help tell that story really to farmers around the world, especially grape growers around the world. So that's super exciting. And then part of how we did all or sort of inspired some of these partnerships is we actually hosted a Farm of the Future Summit last July, which is how we really got to meet Charlie and the folks at Agrology. They were on the invite list, and we just invited folks. Some of them we cold called or sent kind of random invitations to, and others we had already sort of known. But we worked with and partnered with the Wharton School of Business, which is my alma mater, to come and facilitate. And we really just said, come in, here's what we know are the challenges and opportunities facing our growers. Help us work together on solving these problems and help us work together on, really maximizing these opportunities. It was at that summit where we, the CEO of Wilbur Ellis, we had been talking. Wilbur Ellis has been a wonderful partner in Sonoma County to so many of our growers for decades. But we really wanted to say, what if we were to do a really, focused collaboration on healthy soils? What would that look like? So we were excited to announce, hopefully to inspire others in the room. We announced our partnership with Wilbur Ellis during the Farm of the Future Summit. John Buckley, who's their CEO, joined us and was able to start the conversation about what that looked like. So, and this was where we started to overlay and get really excited about the opportunity to, in this one pilot, to also work with Agrology to do even more. And so the Wilbur Ellis, I'm just going to run through that quick and then ask Charlie to tell a little bit about kind of how we expanded that pilot. So for Wilbur Ellis, it's a 5-year pilot program. We're working across 7 ranches, and how we picked the ranches was around really trying to demonstrate different soil types, so we could really maximize our learning through different soil types and climates. We have, I want to say, pilots going on around our counties, up in our northern part where it's, more Cabernet Sauvignon, over in the West County, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, in Sonoma Valley, which has a mix of, the Bordeaux grapes as well as Pinot and Chard and others. So trying to really maximize kind of our learning. And with this pilot, it started with a really great technology called soil optics. So it kind of eliminated the need to go dig all these soil pits historically. It's a technology borrowed from the mining industry. So it uses a gamma ray technology. It's a little machine, and I should have started this by saying I'm not the technical person. My background is marketing and management. So I don't want to get myself in trouble by trying to overstate or analyze some of these things. But the great thing about soil optics, it sits on a current sort of, tractor or ATV. And as you run through the vineyard, it's actually the gamma ray technology is collecting about 335 data points on your topsoil, on your subsoil, on your bedrock soil throughout each acre. And so that is used to give you a really great profile of your soil, kind of as a starting point. And so with Wilbur Ellis, we're working on those pilots. And it's been really great is that we're, with a goal of increasing soil organic matter, increasing water holding capacity in the soil. The Wilbur Ellis folks looking and using those soil maps have really prescribed to those growers in the different areas part of the pilot specific amendments and fertilization and irrigation schedules that would do the most to really increase the organic soil matter. So we're really excited. We're in year 1 of that. And I think importantly, one of the pilot farmers is out at Schoen Farm. So for us, it was a really great way, which is part of our Santa Rosa Junior College, to include kind of a real living lab learning for the students that are, taking viticulture classes and ag classes out at our Santa Rosa Junior College program. So that's one of the places that we have our pilot program running. And honestly, the goals for all of these programs, and when you talk about the growers, but specifically Wilbur Ellis, was really around helping increase the productivity of the vineyard and the longevity of the vineyard. So, and when I say productivity, that can either be a quality, so is it producing better, or it can be a tonnage, depending on the goal. So is it a heavy production vineyard, or is it really focused on, 2 to 3 tons per acre and increasing the quality of those grapes? But the goal overall is for vineyard longevity. And I think that's just the goal overall for all of them, is how do we ensure if we could stop the vineyard from having to be replanted or slow that process down to replant 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, that is real money in our farmers' pockets, and a benefit to all of our partners, since it takes such a long time for us to, bring back vineyards after, once we replant, wait the 2 to 3 to 4 years where we can get our first crop. So it was part of that conversation, Charlie, right? Where you were sitting in the room, we're announcing Wilbur Ellis pilot, and you're like, wait a minute, I think we might be able to add some value to that and learn even more. And now I'm going to put you on the spot. So maybe you weren't, knowing that I was going to do this, you thought you were going to be quizzing me, but now I get to interview you. But it was through this that you really said, is there a way to overlay what we do and our carbon sensors into this Wilbur Ellis pilot and get even better data? So I would love to hear, Charlie, like what were you thinking, and what kind of inspired you for that comment? Yeah, what were you thinking?
Yeah, well, it's been such a fun collaboration, honestly. I think that as we're looking at this idea of the farm of the future, I think that the farm of the future is obviously going to use a variety of different technologies, service providers, inputs. It's going to be a combination, I think, of really kind of like old tech and really new high tech. And that's what I love about regenerative agriculture and just good farming, is that in a lot of ways, you're talking about the legacy. It's this kind of twofold legacy, right? Because in a lot of ways, it's actually kind of going back to these older ways of farming that our grandparents farmed, where it's more diversity and cover crops and compost, but then also using these really high tech kind of solutions like soil optics and the gamma ray, these maps that they create. And so yeah, we started Agrology's kind of participation in this project started not this year, but last year. And we did a very small deployment. I believe it was like 2 or 3 sensors at Sunnyview. And then through this conversation with the Sonoma Winegrowers and Wilbur Ellis, it became apparent that doing real-time impact quantification for looking at what are the effects of these different practices and these different biological amendments on soil health. The soil optics maps are great. I think actually I have a slide of them right here. So this is kind of where we started, right? These are really great, but they are not just a snapshot in time. So the thing about the farm of the future, right, is that soil health, in my opinion, is going to be a very big pillar of it. There's going to be a variety of different things, including, electrification, these electric vehicles. But in terms of increasing the productivity and the longevity of vineyards, soil health is really at the base of that. And what is soil health? It's biology, right? And so if you're doing soil samples, or if you're doing these maps, they're really great snapshots in time. But where agrology comes in is that it's continuous and it's real-time data. And so we can actually see, as we apply, for example, humic acid or a vermicompost extract, we can actually see the response in the biology in real time. So we expanded our kind of involvement in this project, and we're going to be doing, and we already have installed, I don't know, maybe a third of them, 16 sensors across 7 sites. So a really, I think it's probably the largest landscape-wide approach to studying, regenerative and sustainable practices in this kind of comprehensive way, right? Where it's not just one vineyard and one set of practices, but through this collaboration with Wilbur Ellis, we're looking at all these different soil types, different growers with different management techniques, cover cropping, no-till. We're looking at, like I said, humic acid, a bunch of different sort of biologic amendments. We're looking at, just a variety of different things. And we're seeing the responses in soil health. As you were kind of talking about, what's really great about healthy, vital, living soils is that they do sequester more carbon, but that's just one of their secondary effects, right? And so we can stay focused on total organic carbon or soil carbon, and that's a really important piece of the puzzle. But as we're looking at respiration, we're really looking at the base of the pyramid. And there's a variety of other things that come from healthy soils, including better better like aggregation in the soil and actually better structure. So there's more oxygen flowing. There's better water infiltration because of that. So you're getting less erosion, which we all know. Topsoil is a very valuable thing that we don't want eroding or being lost into our waterways. You're getting better nutrient cycling. So, farmers potentially can use less fertilizer. And even when they do use fertilizer, it's more available for the plants. More of it's actually being digested by the microbes and being turned into a plant available form. And then we're also getting increases in quality. There's this amazing kind of branch of research that's emerging that shows that when there's more life in the soil, you're getting more production of these things called secondary plant metabolites. And these are these biochemicals that plants create in response to stress. And one really good part about it is that it makes crops like vines more elastic when there are challenges. When there's heat waves or droughts, it's actually making them healthier and more resilient to extreme weather, which we know because of climate change, we're going to be getting more and more of that. But then there's this awesome secondary benefit, which is these are the same biochemicals that create high quality wine grapes. These are the tannins and the polyphenols, and like in blueberries, for example, antioxidants. It's the things that are making our crops high quality and medicinal, and in the case of wine, creating high quality wines. So by studying soil health continuously, we're just bringing one piece to the puzzle, and it's been a really fun collaboration. We've been doing these meetings with growers and with the agronomists that they work with at Wilbur Ellis, and kind of deciding, okay, what are we going to study at this site, given the huge factor of different soil types, what they're doing in terms of management, what different inputs they're playing with. And so we're going to be able to create, I think, quite a few case studies. I think probably every vineyard or maybe every other vineyard will create these amazing case studies that we're excited to share with not only Sonoma County, but as you mentioned, Karissa, kind of the whole world. So we're really honored to be a part of it. And I think it's a really exciting and also very forward-thinking project.
No, well, we're super excited to have you involved. And I think that's what's really important to talk about. We just talk about collaboration in general. And I think we're agriculture. It's so interesting. I think it's on the vineyards, it's in the farming piece of the wine industry where you can get some of the best collaboration, because there's no incentive as a farmer, and I've heard them say this, for you to learn something about having healthier soils, using less water, more conservation. There's no reason not to share that information and that data to make your neighbor have better information and be a better farmer. And so I love that I think it really did have to start, on our farms, on our ranches. And then I'm excited to see how do we build that up. So it's that, definitely that nature of collaboration, just from the very start, and kind of an open call. I mean, when we asked, and I think that's the other thing, if, regions out there are looking at a similar model, for us, it's like, we understand we have so we have about 60,000 acres in Sonoma County. We asked our farmers, like, who would do a pilot program? Like, I don't want to be out asking partners to come in and work with us if we don't have growers that are like, yeah, I'm willing to take a block, or I'm willing to invest in a pilot. So we have about 15,000 acres. So about 25%, of our county said, hey, we're available. Like, we have these acres available to do pilots. So I'm excited. Like, we're doing these 7 sites now with you and Wilbur Ellis. We're doing 6 different farming operations with John Deere. What's unique about the John Deere collaboration is, we have one that's like a tiny family business. They farm about 80 acres of grapes total. I know that might seem big for some of the really small family businesses if you're listening in, but they have 1 or 2 tractors. It's not like they have a big, fleet of tractors. And then we have others that are vineyard management companies where they're moving vehicles or thinking about soil types around the county based on where they farm and what, owners that they work with. And so you can really create unique and different sort of pilots that we can learn from. And like you said, I mean, what you're doing, we're going to get so many great case studies out of it, just because of the way we've set up, being mindful going in of what the different things we want to learn. And then we'll have probably some surprises along the way too.
Yeah.
And I think you've captured, right? Because so that would be the other thing at our office. We're really fortunate, Sonoma County Winegrowers, our office for our organization is actually on a vineyard. And we've really turned that into kind of a demo vineyard. So all of the things that we've been employing, whether it's the agrology sensors and the Wilbur Ellis, pilot on healthy soils. We have charging stations from Ford Pro are all at our office. And we're putting in sort of our own farm of the future walk so we can kind of have a demo vineyard. So I think, really being able to showcase that is great. And I think you mentioned, but Sunnyview, which is where our office is, was the first site that you put agrology sensors. And I think you've been capturing, is there any data? There it is. I was saying, I know you have data
Yeah,
somewhere.
it queued it up.
Drum
Yeah.
roll, please.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
so what do we?
just to tap into also that last comment you had, I think we've seen that's how ag tech is adopted, right? It's all about the neighbor looking over the fence and saying, "Oh, what are you doing over there? Oh, he's doing those crazy regenerative practices," and then they see it working, and then there's that excitement. And that's really, I think, one of the coolest pieces about this Farm of the Future project is that it's real growers. It's not like in a laboratory or a university farm. These are real commercial operations. And the other thing about whether it's regenerative practices or just kind of, better farming, as I like to call it, every grower and every field and every vineyard is so unique. And so we do need to kind of develop, we have this toolkit of different practices, but we need to figure out what works well within what context, whether that's soil type or whether that's a varietal of grape or a management sort of protocol. And that's where agrology really can add a ton of data, because we're constantly looking at that, the response in terms of how is this changing soil carbon stocks and how is this changing the life in the soil. And so this is an example of some of the data we've been pulling from Shown. This is overlaying soil temperature and carbon flux. And so I believe that the soil temperature is the green line, which is this one. As we can see, we installed pretty late last year. Maybe we had a little bit more data than this, but this is showing basically, 7/23 all the way through, basically right now. So we see overall, a cooling trend, as we move into October. We saw a big decline in microbial activity, which is this yellow line. That's likely due to the soil getting very dry and hot. Microbes really like a certain temperature range, and they really like moisture. And so as we're drying out and kind of moving towards harvest, doing that purposeful sort of water stress for the vines and to increase, again, increasing those secondary plant compounds, right? The sugars and the polyphenols and all that, we're getting a decline in microbial activity. And then as we're starting to get some rains in the late fall, we're seeing an increase of microbial activity. Then it kind of drops off again. This is likely due to temperature, as we're getting cold. At this point, we're in November and December. And then we're starting to see this nice spike throughout the spring. One thing that's really interesting that's important to emphasize is this is looking at soil respiration. So this is the CO2 that's coming out of the soil pores. The majority of life, quote unquote, good life within the soil are aerobic creatures, whether they're earthworms or protozoa or nematodes or fungi, bacteria, all of them, they all respire CO2 as they go throughout their day, as they decompose organic matter, pushing carbon through that process and towards kind of its final, our goal for carbon, which is for it to become recalcitrant or stored in the soil for a long time. But all of them respire CO2. So we're seeing an increase in the CO2 coming out of the pores. What's great about the agrology system is we're also monitoring how that CO2 is being reabsorbed by the canopy. There's this really interesting thing where, for example, in greenhouses, they often pipe in CO2 because it's a limiting factor in the growth of a plant. So just because we're seeing more CO2 come out of the pores doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It's actually oftentimes very good for the planet, because what we're essentially monitoring is that the carbon cycle, how CO2 is being digested by microbes, respired, released from the pores, reabsorbed by the canopy of the crop, and then brought back down into the soil in the form of soil exudates or root exudates, which is sugars and carbohydrates that the roots are actually on purpose feeding the microbiome in exchange for nutrients. And this is where we get into like the whole, fantastic world of fungi, mycelial fungi and all that. But as we're monitoring this, the carbon cycle is moving more rapidly. There's more metabolism. There's more activity in the carbon cycle. And every time that carbon kind of wheel turns, some of it is going into long-term storage. So we want to see more respiration. We want to see more active carbon cycles, because all of that is creating healthier soil. It's increasing organic matter and it's increasing carbon in these, the soil's carbon stocks. I think this is another just quick, look at, this is the respiration we're seeing from Sunnyview. So this is soil flux. So we're seeing how carbon is being released from the pores and then also brought back down. Overall, yeah, just a really significant and a very healthy looking soil, right? We can tell from these respiration curves, if we go into soils that are very dead with very little microbial life, they just look like flat lines. Whereas this is like a very healthy heartbeat for a very active and healthy soil. And I think that's pretty much it in terms of the data. So now I have some questions for you. I don't know if you have
Yeah.
any comments or questions on that.
My comment is I'm really glad I asked you to explain all of that. So instead of me, so that was a way more useful part of the conversation. But I do think what's interesting for us, like for me, just to take away is to be able to take what we're learning, what the data you're showing, and then overlay as we look at that. And I was part of some of these conversations, adding on, we know we irrigated at this point. So you're watching what's happening with the data we're getting, or we know there was a rain event, or we know that it was really cold or it was frost and we had to frost protect that night. So as we overlay sort of the occurrences that we know both naturally were happening, rain, frost, et cetera, versus where we're intervening by irrigating or, adding fertilization or tilling or not tilling or doing those things, we can see what's actually happening in the soil in response to that too. So I think it really will be a prescription for our farmers here, depending on where they farm and their soil types, about how they can really think about sort of the bigger picture of what they're doing. So lots of exciting stuff. And I think we don't have enough data out there and enough case studies out there, especially as we get to have access to more technology and innovation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know we've got a lot of questions in the chat. I'm gonna
Yeah.
jump into, I'm gonna ask a few questions, then I'll
Okay,
jump into the
great.
chat, and then I'll jump back to my questions if we have time. But one of my questions was, I guess it'll be a two-part question. One
Okay, here we
is
go.
sort of, what was the seed? How, like, where did this idea start, right? What was the seed or the initial sort of inspiration for Farm of the Future? And sort of another part of that question is, you seem to, there's all these different, collaborators and partners, everyone from Wilbur Ellis to Ford. What's the through line in terms of how are
Yeah.
all these different collaborators sort of connected into this vision?
Yeah, those are great. And I should just acknowledge, I know we have some of our friends from Wilbur Ellis are on this call. So just a huge thank you to, for all of your support and working with us. And you probably could have presented what I did way better on your behalf, but I'm trying. So, it really, like I said, the inspiration was kind of twofold. We were, like I said, our commitment to sustainability was there. And, we had reached sort of our sustainability goals, although I think with sustainability, as we know, it's definitely a journey, not a destination. So it was kind of like, well, what's next? What with that as our foundation, where do we go to learn more? And we've always thought about our sustainability commitment as, well, let's really look at our total practices and kind of aggregate what we're doing and say, where are we really performing well? And also, where do we need more help, and use that as like kind of a guide. But it really kind of came to, I want to say, a tipping point, again, in that first conversation with Ford Motor Company. And it was just like, well, we could really, we don't want to just showcase your truck. We want to understand the F-150 Lightning. We want to understand how charging works. It's not enough to put it on display. We want to know, does it work? And I was like, and to them, are you curious if it works for ag? I mean, they think of small business, often it's the trades, right? It's the small business that are plumbers, they're electricians, and they're using their trucks as sort of, the piece of equipment to do their entire job. But in agriculture, we're a pretty small part of a big company like Ford, of their business, although Ford's roots were literally in agriculture. So it was kind of a nice tie back. So that was really the inspiration. And we said, well, if Ford is willing to sort of invest in agriculture and invest in learning with us, who else is out there? And I mean, quite honestly, John Deere was next on our list. And as they would say, I don't know if anyone's on here from John Deere, but I was almost a bit of a stalker at some point. I kind of had to apologize because I just wouldn't take no for an answer. Because I literally like found an email address of someone in the organization and was like, you're probably not the right partner, but I'm going to bug you until you get me to someone else that is, that I can talk to. And through that, we were able to invite John Deere into that Farm of the Future Summit we hosted last summer. And it was that in those conversations, I think, that we started to find those threads. And I think really the thread, because you'll notice Ford and John Deere, right, two of the biggest companies, literally global organizations, very large in scale and scope. Exciting for us in that if they get momentum and they want to invest, they can scale. And I think that is really critical. So we love our work with them because it's so scalable and at a rate that is really impressive, right? And much faster. But then it's like, but some of the really interesting technology and innovation and data we could capture comes from quite small, the agrologies of the world, the folks that are just starting and saying, hey, we know how to do something. We're not exactly sure how we apply it to what your grape growers are doing or what's the win for them or how we learn. And so I think it's like to me, it's like everyone's welcome as long as you're willing. And I also think the important part of the model for us, Charlie, which which was we want everyone to have skin in the game. And I mean that in that we're not expecting partners just to come in and say, oh, here's free and we're going to do it all for you. And then when it goes away, our farmers are like, well, now that we have to pay for it, we don't want to use it. It's like, that doesn't work as a model. You don't want to sort of train that behavior. But you also, to get it started, if the farmers are going to put out there sort of their vineyards, their time and investment, then you do want some sort of like, we want access to, your consultants. We want to be able to use some of your technology that maybe we couldn't afford. Can we discount it? Can we try it and see if it works and then invest in it? So I think we're setting up the model a lot of different ways, but the common thread is really that the organizations feel that agriculture is an important part of not just Sonoma County, but of the United States and of the world. And we need a healthy ecosystem in agriculture to really have longevity. And again, it's not just about, can we have a great glass of wine and knowing where that came from and what went into it, but it's about our food system. It's about protecting open space. It's about, security. It's all of those things go into agriculture. So I think the common thread is working with organizations that really are interested in learning, are interested in building a case study and sharing, support collaboration and support agriculture. So that's the thread.
Amazing.
And are willing to show up and respond to my emails and phone calls.
Yeah, totally.
How about that?
With a collaborative attitude. Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
And want to be part of the solution. You have to want to be part of the solution.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something I spend a lot of my time thinking about is how do we create sort of these multi-stakeholder collaborations? And it's really difficult because you have to get a bunch of different people at different parts of the supply chain together. And I think you guys have done an amazing job. It's been really fun for us working with Wilbur Ellis and the growers. And then I think what's so amazing about wine is that there already is this very strong ethos of that place and soil really matter, right? Relationships really matter. It's not a commodity. Every bottle, every vintage, every vineyard is unique. And so expressing that uniqueness through gathering the data on the soil health or through, building out and looking at how we can make their energy use more efficient in terms of their fleet. All of this stuff is really like that storytelling sort of weaving ethos is already such a part of the DNA of viticulture. And so, yeah, it's been really fun for us. I'm going to turn to some of the questions in the chat. Our first one is from Barbara, and it's about kind of the size of different operations. The question is, the pilot program seems to have been with fleet size operations. Is there any advantage for small farmers? I imagine that's probably focused on the electric trucks, on the Lightnings, but also it's a good question for kind of more broadly as well.
Yeah, so I think the one thing we're learning is that no two pilots or organizations that we're collaborating with look the same, right? And what we're going to be able to do to be successful with them doesn't look the same. In the case of Ford Pro, we asked them the size of operation. So I kind of laugh because when Ford Motor Company thinks of fleets, they think of FedEx, Amazon, UPS type systems. I mean, thousands. I mean, I wouldn't even venture to guess how many vehicles are on the road at any one time representing UPS, FedEx, Amazon, et cetera. So when we talk about fleets in agriculture, I mean, it gets down to like, a lot of people think 5 trucks is a fleet for them because that's more than one, right? So with Ford Pro, they specifically asked for our farmers that were going to be pilot farmers to have 20 plus vehicles. And they thought that was meaningful in terms of the telematics, the software data, that if we were tracking at least 20 vehicles across the different pilots, that we'd get really robust data on the idling, the gas use, braking trends, the safety, all of those things, and sort of understanding what the opportunity was to get a notice about time to do an oil change versus the light comes on and you haven't prepared for it. So now the truck comes in at the end of the day and it's out of service for a day because you weren't prepared for that or whatever else might be happening. But the actual pilot only was with one truck. So each pilot farmer only got one truck, one e-transit van to use. And so the learning for them on what's the value of an electric vehicle was really about what does it mean to put one electric vehicle into our fleet, whatever that size is, to help them understand when the next time, and the idea wasn't that the farmers would overnight transition everything to electric vehicles. I mean, that we know if you're out there and you're running a business, you know, you don't have the financial support to go do that. So what it was, can we help growers understand the next time they're going to invest in buying a truck specifically or a van for their business, what is the trade-off, the considerations they should be making on trying to decide if that truck or van should be an electric one or a gas one or a diesel one or a hybrid in some cases? How do we help them make that decision? So although the pilot was 20 plus vehicles to really help with the data analysis, the actual decision we're trying to help the farmers make is, should my next truck be electric? And I think that really plays out into small business as well. With John Deere, it was a little different story. It was around, understanding honestly the different uses of smart apply. So in one of our pilot ranches, they farm apples and grapes. Another one of our pilot farmers farms vineyards as well as blueberries. So it was trying to get a little bit of a diversified ag in there, and kind of the size of the operation wasn't that important to them. It was kind of like, what's the use case going to be? Obviously with you and Wilbur Ellis, we were very specific. It didn't have to be a large vineyard. I mean, our blocks, it could be even a block of 5 acres, whether that's the entire vineyard or a block within a 50-acre vineyard or 100-acre vineyard. We really said kind of a 5-acre block was what we really wanted to pilot. So, and again, in different soil types and different climates. So, and then we overlaid obviously the agrology, pilot on top of that. So it really comes in different shapes and sizes depending on both what the partner, a Ford or John Deere is looking to learn, and really what we have matching it. I kind of joke, I'm like, I should start the match.com for ag tech and ag, farmers. Like, you got a technology, here's my farmers, let's make a match. And we're doing a version of that, but a little bit more organically, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. So now we've got some other questions. Ludovic has some really good questions, some pretty challenging ones. So here we go. We'll dive into it. I'll take the first one. So
Okay.
the first one is, are you looking at soil's redox potential as part of your overall soil health assessment? The direct answer would be not right now directly in terms of redox potential, but the maps that Soil Optics created that I showed earlier, they kind of look like heat maps of vineyards. They do show soil organic matter and the CEC, the exchange capacity of the soils. And so we use those heat maps to decide where we're going to put the agrology sensors so that it was like a representative place within the vineyard, or sometimes on purpose, we'd actually put them in very different CEC or organic matter places in the vineyard in order to look at what are the differences in terms of microbial activity, in terms of carbon cycling in these different types of soils. So it depends on the vineyard. But yeah, I think that overall, there's so many different data points that we can gather and analyze. And it can actually get kind of overwhelming and a bit just practically just impossible to kind of try to weave every single data point together. So we're doing a combination of trying to keep it somewhat simple and straightforward, and also trying to weave as much different data together as we can. And I think this is honestly, again, when I think of the farm of the future, that's sort of where my mind goes, right? Is now we're definitely in this age of AI and generative AI, and it's in, like you said, it's in it's the headlines every single day. And I think for the first time, we're actually able to weave that much data together and start to find patterns from 1,000 different data points or 10,000 different data points. And so we're definitely just kind of scratching at the surface in terms of what we're doing right now. And there's so much more that we could explore, but it is a really exciting place and stage to do that sort of collaborative weaving, because otherwise it's a lot harder unless you have, the Sonoma Winegrowers are doing such a good job creating that stage and that sandbox for different technologies or different groups to come together and collaborate. Whereas if we were just trying to do that sort of in the quote, like the free market or, just out in the world without that container, it would be a lot harder. Potentially we could, but it would just be like one or two sort of service providers as opposed to this entire multi-stakeholder sort of alliance of different groups
Yeah.
that are getting behind this project.
And
Um,
Shelley, I would add too, I think not to answer that question, so thank you for taking that one. But one of the benefits too with the collaboration, we saw it through the summit, is that it's just access to, because I think our farmers, not all of the information and challenges that are happening in ag get back to the folks that can do something about it, right? So I think for us, we see it too as a two-way conversation. Like, we're going to learn about this specific technology, or we're going to learn about this truck, or there's this, sprayer, we're going to learn specific, but then also it opens just a line of communication to say, this is great, but you know what we're really grappling with? We're really trying to understand how we do more efficient pruning, or we're really trying to understand, what are other opportunities for frost protection that might use less water and not be a $40,000 to $50,000 investment in, a wind machine, for example. Like, how could we scale something that would be cheaper? So I think for us, we see it as like, this is a two-way street. We're going to comment on and learn a lot and build those case studies on the things we're doing and actually piloting, but that opens the conversation about what else our farmers need. And I think that's like really exciting, because then you have players at the table that can actually take that information and do something about it. And I think just bridging, private, public, government, all of those partners. I mean, partnership is it. I think there was a big wine market council event yesterday, and I think one of the things that came up is, what's the future of our wine industry? And it was like, we need more partnerships, and I think that's the fundamental piece of this, is trying to do that.
Absolutely. I always love to say that, and I stole this from John Kemp, so all credit to him. But they always, he has this great quote around how regenerative agriculture is actually at its base, at its most fundamental level, it's about regenerating relationships. And that speaks exactly to that partnership, and that collaboration. And definitely, a big bow to you guys for actually getting so many different people in the room. Because like you said, it's sort of easy, or oftentimes we see, technology companies coming in and kind of telling the farmer or the grower what they need, and here, use this. And it's really, it's much more valuable to have that real-time feedback, and that, growers have real problems that they're trying to solve every day. And so connecting them with these different service providers, or technologies, or even giant companies like Ford and John Deere, it's such a great way for the right capabilities to be developed that solve real problems that need solving.
No, totally agree.
I got another question. I don't think, let's see, if there's any more in the chat, feel free to highlight them for me, Holly. But one I had is, I would love, I know we're going to be doing sort of a field day at Shown soon. And I'd love if you could just chat about that and kind of the goal for that field day. That'd be great.
So we're looking at doing a field day at Shown Farm. We're actually going to integrate it into our grower barbecue. So it's kind of a bit of we're finalizing the date right now, but we're going to be able to showcase the demo. So we'll have the Smart Apply equipment out there from John Deere. We're going to highlight, because it's going to be at Shown Farm, we're going to be able to actually show the Wilbur Ellis pilot on the healthy soils in action, with the agrology sensors in the vineyard. So what that data looks like. And so for us, it's a way to like really get folks out into the vineyard, meeting the partners and collaborators we're working with, and seeing firsthand what we're learning. So really getting, literally your hands dirty, which I know our farmers want to be out there and talk with, the pilot farmers that are doing these pilots. What are they learning? Why did they sign up? What are they getting out of this? But also be able to see kind of everything in action. And I was just going to add it. It's interesting for us because we sit in, I think the other important piece of these pilots and partnerships is high value crops are not always, or specialty crops, as we call them, high value crops are not always the top of mind for a lot of, especially the bigger organizations, right? And I think that was a frustration. And I grew up in the Midwest. My grandparents had farms in Iowa and Nebraska. Like, I'm all for corn and soybeans, but we see that a lot of the big companies, that's where they put their innovation. That's where they fund and invest in learning about agriculture. It's often not coming, even though California is so rich with agriculture, but we're not always seeing it come to the specialty crops, so we really felt like we had to go out there and remind them that we're really valuable too. Even though wine grapes might be small in global agriculture, it doesn't mean we're any less important, and that our farmers need that kind of support. So that was and not something I actually talk about that often, but I think just how many kind of high value crop, especially crop folks are connected to that or on this. conversation today. It's an important piece that we have to kind of not only fight for agriculture, but certainly fight for our piece of what's going on in agriculture.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. One question that I always like to ask, because it's a fun one, because it's so open-ended, is what question didn't I ask, or that, the group didn't ask, that you wish that we had?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of joke because my board probably like gets exhausted, but I always put up the slide in almost every meeting, which is like, what's next, right? So I think that's where I would say what's next for us is, again, the demo day that we were talking about, kind of this field day, which is a great way. But we're actually looking at putting together kind of our first white paper on what we're learning. And so for us, it'll be a kind of a capture of what we learned with Ford Pro and actually sharing some of that specific data. But really what we're trying to do, the goals of the different pilots and what we're trying to learn kind of with Wilbur Ellis and agrology and that 5-year pilot, and like a moment in time of what we've learned so far, and really setting up what we're doing with John Deere. So we're looking at putting out, starting probably this summer, our first white paper on all of this, and continuing to share that data. And like I said, we're excited that we're doing a lot of these pilots, right here in Sonoma County in our backyard, but the goal is to help farmers and businesses and organizations everywhere be able to use that data and make better decisions from it.
Yeah, I was actually about to ask that. So can you expand a little bit
There you
more in
go.
terms of like what are the, if you had to describe sort of the pillars? I know we went through the farming thing, but what pillars, or what, let's zoom out 5 years from now. What questions are you going to be like, wow, I'm really glad we answered those questions? And I'm
Yeah.
sure there's a laundry list, right? There's probably about 1,000, but in terms of like the big pillars that you're excited to explore, what are the big things that you'd love to see to come out of this project?
Yeah, I mean, it's all of the, again, all the pilots we're learning. So I'm really excited to say, were we able to move the needle? Did we actually create better soils through really being prescriptive, understanding our starting point in those vineyards or those pilots, doing different, being very prescriptive about what we were going to do and when and our timing and getting that information. So that's exciting to me. I think understanding what a partnership 5 years later can look like with a global company like John Deere that can bring so much innovation and scalability to the table. We're talking about, hey, we need, automation and electric tractors that can scale, that have the dealerships that can support them, that can, in our backyard. And so how do we do that? But overall, and I keep going back to this because I know just the cost of doing business, not just in farming, but everywhere, is going up. So to me, the big question always for me is, how do we tell the farmer how to spend that extra dollar if they have it, or the dollar that they want to invest? Should I buy a new tractor? Should I buy an electric truck? Should I do something different in my amendments? Should I invest in an agrology sensor? Should I think about smart irrigation technology? If I were to use a dollar, if I were going to sit back on my farm, my organization, and know my goals as a farmer, where would I put that next dollar? Because I think if we can do that, we're helping them stay in business as well as innovate, have better vineyards, better soils, and better long-term products. So that to me is like, if we can answer that question where each farmer feels like they know the best place to put that next dollar, that would be an unbelievable win.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I think those case studies are just going to do such a good job at doing that, because every farmer is going to answer that question in a different way, right? Context is so important there. And so as we have all these different case studies from different vineyards and different AVAs, they're going to be able to find the one that kind of feels closest to them,
Yes,
or feels like,
exactly.
okay, this is the right combination of things for me. Um,
Absolutely.
we are coming up at the top of the hour. If anyone else has any additional questions, I'm sure they can get in touch with me or with you. We'd love to kind of follow up with folks. But I just really appreciate the time of everyone for coming. And it's really an honor for us to have these important conversations. Better farming, regenerative agriculture, whatever kind of words we want to put on it. There's such an amazing tide shift that we're in, and really recentering soil health and recentering kind of these new technologies for understanding how to run more sustainable vineyards, but also financially sustainable, like you were talking about, Karissa, is so huge. So thank you so much for coming and for
Absolutely.
sharing so much of your insights and wisdom. We really
And,
appreciate it.
and, and I would be remiss, Charlie, if I didn't say, hey, out there, if you have something you want to pilot and we haven't met, reach out to me. If you go to sonomawinegrape.org, which is our website, my contact information is in there under staffing. So you can email me, call me. But we're always, like I said, the only way this is going to work moving forward is if we do more work together. So reach out, let me know. We'd love to continue building these partnerships, collaborations, and relationships. So
Awesome. Well, I know we're at the top of the hour. There are a few more good questions. So Karissa, if you can stay, but I just want
yeah,
to, in case people have to jump off, just want to say thanks everyone so much for attending. There is this really great question from Barbara about how are we getting folks to pay attention to the grape
yeah.
growers' efforts to farm sustainably, to improve their carbon footprint, their conservation efforts around soil and water. How do we get our customers to support these efforts? And, you know, as a
Yeah.
marketing organization, I think it's a great question, right? How do we get this to translate to a premium or brand loyalty? Where do we find the ROI in these types of things?
Yeah, no, it is a great question, Barbara. So we are doing a lot of outreach on this. So more and more our education focusing and outreach to the wineries in Sonoma County, Napa, others who buy our grapes is communicating this through kind of our database. We're also we're really excited about, we were part of a global sustainability case study. It was called Go Green. It was professors out of Denmark as well as UC Berkeley that were writing case studies of sort of grassroots sustainability movements around the world. And they chose Sonoma County Winegrowers to be their US case study. And obviously the only case study they did from the United States. What was exciting for me about that is the other night I was presenting some of our learnings from that case study. And we were on sort of a Zoom like this with another case study on coffee farming in Vietnam and another case study on sort of another part of ag in Hong Kong. And so this group is actually, they're writing case studies, books, everything. And we get to be a part of that messaging. So I think when you hit a scale where you're going to get that kind of recognition and transfer of information, it's really exciting. I know, especially the folks from Vietnam who were focused on coffee sustainability. We were just, the questions, we were like, enough from everyone else. We just want to talk to each other about the learnings and how we do more, because it was really exciting. So we're doing our best, to tell the story of sustainability, to reach out to journalists, to tell our story. It's why we have a Farm of the Future walk at our vineyard that we're working on setting up. So anytime media, sommeliers, buyers, wineries come to our office, we can showcase what we're doing and all these different efforts that are really, make our growers, not only are we so proud of them, but so proud of the work we're doing.
Yeah, amazing. I think that's such an important part of all of this, right? Is that there is farms that are more sustainable, more regenerative. Not only do they produce different data in terms of like the soil respiration curves and all the stuff agrology is monitoring, but they actually feel different, right? And so how do we translate like that sensory experience? How do we, that people are, we've seen that consumers, not only are they demanding more sustainability in terms of the products they buy just off the shelves, but if there's an emotional or if there's a powerful kind of sensory difference or quality difference, that's something I'm really excited about continuing to explore. And I'm sure that'll be part of this.
Yeah. And wine is unique in that we literally, in a lot of cases, put the ranch name on the bottle. So you can actually go back and be like, well, what, not only is it the winery, but what in the practices that go into the winemaking, but what was happening on that farm, on that ranch with those grapes, which is pretty unique, right? You go into most grocery stores and, you don't know exactly where that tomato came from, certainly farmers markets and other places, but you go into the store and you might not have that connection. So I think wine's unique in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think we can leave it at that unless you have any
Sounds good.
last comments. Yeah, thank you so much for your time. And again, everyone, thanks for
Absolutely.
attending. We'll send out a follow-up email with contact information for both myself and Karissa. And yeah, just a lot of appreciation for everyone for taking time out of your busy day to join this. Bye, everyone.